Well, I'm continuing with this painting that I had done a part one for, and the part one involved doing some cling wrap, creating a perspective of the table, and showing the blue vase. So the next step is to paint the tulips. And I've decided I'm going to paint them with a very, very vivid, bold red mixtures. And I'm going to go outside of the lines of my drawings and make them fuller. I had done a little sketch, and maybe some of them will be thinner. The thinner ones just reflect that they haven't fully opened yet. But I want to have some full. These were done from a sketch that I had of tulips that I had purchased this past week. But now they have opened up and they're much bigger. So the nice thing about tulips is they come in so many wonderful colors, and so one doesn't have to limit themselves even to the colors of the tulips that you purchase. So as long as you get the shapes right and the values right, you can change the colors. So I am actually changing these to be a very vivid red. And the reason for that is that otherwise they'll kind of disappear in this rather bright orange and yellow background. So I want them to be really strong in color. So I'm starting out with a basic scarlet, and then I'm going to wet these, and I'm going to put some magenta in them now in terms of some shading. The color will reflect the fact that the light is on the right, because that is where I already indicated that there was going to be light on the right-hand side. I always decide myself where the light is on, you know, if it's a complicated landscape or complicated still life with reflections on the table and things like that. You might want to just go with wherever the current light is. But oftentimes when we do a still life, we don't have a clear spot of light. And often there's a lot of natural light coming in through windows and things. So in order to create something with more dramatic view, you might want to create your own light. I'm going to put a little bit of, I already put in some quinacridone fuchsia, and I'm going to put in a little bit of violet. I'm really popping in a lot of color here, being rather bold with the color here. I'm going to take some orange. And my palette is has a lot of violets and reds in this palette. I have a separate palette with blues and greens. And that way, first of all, I don't like to limit myself to just a few colors. I've always had this kind of palette, and I like the fact that I can just go anywhere on the palette and grab whatever reds that I want and have a diversity of reds in the painting, and they're all at my fingertips and when the paint manufacturers make so many absolutely fabulous colors, I see no reason to limit myself to one yellow, one blue, and one green, even though that is how I initially learned how to paint. And while it's true, you can mix many variations from just those three colors. For me, a good part of the fun of painting is to play with the colors and enjoy them, fully enjoy them. So that's what I'm doing here. This is quinacridone violet. I've got a quinacridone magenta that I'm going to slip in this one here. Some more violet over here. I'm really putting this color in very heavily, all these colors. I'm going to put a little bit of orange in one of these ones here in the front. It's got some red from the brush because I'm not cleaning it in between, but it's all right, you can still see a bit of that orange. Let me get some more of that orange because I do want a couple of them to convey the orange. So I'll do another one over here and then put some red around it. And some violet down here on the bottom. Later on, I'm going to come in and define those a little bit more. I don't want them all to be so open in some areas, so I'll close up some of them with a slightly different color back here. And I'm going to carry some strong color in the background, just a bit. I want the sense that there are flowers still in the background, so I'm going to put some of that here. And not define it. I'm being very rough with this, more than I normally would be, but I feel like I just want to play with this a lot because I have a very well-defined vase and I don't want to have this painting be boring by having too much definition. So I'll just put, and I'm going to do a little bit of splatter here. Yeah. And take some of this violet and bring that near the rose here. I'll bring some over here. Normally I do a lot of glazing with subtle colors, very soft glazes, but I'm feeling like this painting really needs to have a different approach because of the brightness and the diversity of the background. So I want the tulips to really pop out and be very clear. And I'm going to bring some of that red in here and there. The leaves will, of course, have some tones of green in them, but I want it balanced with some reds coming down into some of these leaves. So that red that red will pop out and be visible through the greens of the leaves. And the greens will be, and I want some of this, I want to make sure I don't lose the nice cling wrap design that is there and cover it up completely. So we'll just do a little bit, but not too much. That should be enough. When I come in later, I'll put in the greens after this dries. This is a little too thick there. After this dries, then I'll come in and define the flowers a little more carefully with some very darks. I'm going to go with some very darks because I think that the background is calling for that. And then there'll be this whole, I think I'll put in a little more red. I go with some alizarin crimson in here. Some of it is bleeding out, that's okay. Don't want it too much bleeding, but a little bit is good. Yeah. Don't want that too bright back there behind the group of flowers because it's going to be very dark between them. Okay, I think that's, I want some light to show through, but not too much. Okay, I think that's off to a start. These are a little too defined. I'll have to diffuse them a little bit. And tone down that one there. And let that go back up into the background there. I think that's a good start. I'm going to put in a few red stems, even though that's not what you would normally think, but it will set the stems apart in this sea of green that will be down below. And I can always go over it with some green and it'll just become a dark. Okay. Now, over here, I think I might as well create a little bit of a shadow. And I think I'll go with some blues in that shadow area. I'll take some cobalt blue. It's primarily like a cerulean blue and manganese blue in the vase, but I'll take some cobalt blue, which is more toned down, and mix it with a little bit of rose madder, which is will give a nice violet tone. Let's see if that will work. Yeah, I think that's going to work for a shadow. So let me do that. And I'm not going to show any of the roses in the shadow. I'm going to assume that the shadow is just the vase shadow. And I'm making it a little darker as I get down into the area of the vase. connecting it to the vase. Just get a little more dark, a little more violet down in this area, so it has some of that same kind of diversity we see in the vase, not just a solid. Okay, I think that'll do it. I don't think I want to do anything more than that. I want to just, it's got a nice amount of granulation, which is nice. I might drop a little bit of the manganese blue in there just to carry it into the vase. So that begins to then have a better relationship with the vase. Okay, so I think this is a good stopping point. I'm going to let everything dry really well. Probably won't do anything more in the table, except maybe I will want to at some point do some kind of glaze over the whole table to just make it less yellow. But for now, this is fine. Okay. That's a good point for stopping and letting everything dry. We'll be back at it. Okay. We're going to take up the next step. I'm using some Payne's Gray blue hue for accenting these tulips, and because they're already very dark, so I need to use a very, very dark shade. And if that isn't quite dark enough, I may even go to a little bit of ivory black, because they've already got a dark violet in them, and I need this accent to be fairly strong. So we remember that the light is on the right side, and that most of this accent will therefore be on the shadow side. I had done the shadow here with violets and some of the blue put in as reflective blue. But since reflections always come toward the viewer, I made a reflection alone, not a shadow, but a reflection alone in the table, and put a little bit of titanium white in that to carry the reflection that is on the light side. I don't often use the white, but this is a watercolor. It's one of the 3 watercolor whites. There's zinc white and titanium white and Chinese white. And the titanium white is the most, from my point of view, seems to be the most transparent of the 3. But I was using it directly from the tube deliberately because I wanted it to show up very bright and against the blue, and have therefore used it also dry brush. So very dry and a little bit rough in both places here. And I don't want to do these tulips exactly the same in each way. This one is largely in shadow because it's behind the other one. So I'll put a light shadow on one side, but on the other side, behind it, I'm going to put more of a shadow. And here the same thing, a little more of a shadow. So I really want this. But these shadows are because they're behind the other tulip, not because they're away from the light. And I'll do a little more up that here, and some between the petals. Make the petals a little different in this case. I don't want them all to be the same. And every now and then where there's a little bit of a white showing through, I'm just going to leave that. I like that, some of that white here and there, some of that sparkle to show through. Here I'll just put it mostly on the bottom. It's already got a dark shadow behind the other tulip, so I don't want to necessarily put it everywhere. And I'll blend a little bit here with just water. I usually use some fairly light colors, but since I had a very bright background already, I went with these very dark reds and dark violets from the start. It isn't necessary to always follow a pattern, do the same thing every time. And I often don't do the backgrounds first, but in this case I was playing with my cling wrap and just wanted to see what emerged from that, and then once I had a cling wrap pattern, then I decided that I could put a table in there and create a still life of tulips. So I have tulips right now in my vase, and they were inspiring me. And I had this table and vase already created, largely created by the playing with the cling wrap. So then it just seemed like reasonable to put the tulips in this vase. So sometimes the painting emerges from the background, and sometimes the painting emerges from the still life itself as the first thing that you see, or the landscape that you see. But I love playing with the paint sometimes, and then I've got about 40 papers with patterns and things on them that I have just created for the fun of it, because some days I'll do nothing but play with the paint and see if any of the patterns speak to me. So with this one, I think I like the idea of taking some alizarin crimson and putting that here more strongly in this area, not the black. So Yeah. Just carrying that out a little bit. I'm being a little bit messy. I'm not staying in any lines here. The idea is to have each one of these be a little different. And I think I'll carry a little more alizarin crimson over here. That kind of loosely reflects and indicates there might be a flower there. And here, just for the sake of color, I'll put it here for harmonizing the color. And I like the way it's already started to drip here, so I'm going to have that dripping continue. I've got the camera sitting on this board, so unfortunately I can't lift the board, but otherwise I probably want to lift the board and drip that, but I can do it with my brush. Just carry forward with my brush some lines here. And let the paint flow. But normally I would lift the board and let it tilt. But I can't do that with the camera sitting right on the board. Here, that's good. Here, blend that in a little bit. Yeah, I'm starting to get the amount of color and just a little bit over here too. And then a little more of the alizarin so that it's brighter than what I just put in there. And then a little bit over here. There, that's a nice shape. That's almost like a tulip shape. Okay, I think that's starting to come together. The next thing will be to do the stems and leaves. And like I did mention already, I will have some red in those stems and leaves. So I'll just put a little bit of darker red in some of those leaves for now, because they're just going to be, I'll work with the greens and blues next. But I want to carry a little bit of that red down. I've got a leaf dropping here. I want to carry a little bit of that red down so it's already there for accenting the leaves. Yeah, you can see, I think, starting to carry the color down in a way that works for me. I'll get a little bit more bright here. Yeah, that's nice. This is almost pure pigment. I'm really putting very little water in here. I just took this paint from the tube, so it's very wet already. So I just added a little bit of water to it, and it creates some wonderful brilliance. Yeah, that's one of the benefits of taking paint fresh from the tube. I often just work from my palette when I'm doing glazing, but in this case, having the paint all wet and concentrated from the tube was something that I needed, so I put out a lot of fresh paint for this. Okay, that is starting to come together. Now, in terms of reflection, I am going to carry just a bit of that color, but with watered down, into the so-called table. Yeah, into the table, which was just, but it's watered down and soft. I'll put some of it here, again, watered down and soft, just a little bit. As reflection. Okay, good. Okay, the next step will be leaves, and then the final step will be some very fine calligraphic lines up in here on the tulips, and maybe some sticks popping out here and there, and maybe even a little dry brush white on some of the tips of the tulips to brighten some of them up. So that's a good place to take a little break, let this completely dry, and the next step will be the leaves. Well, I think it's dry enough for us to do a little bit on the leaves. I stuck in a couple of shapes a little and accented them. Also here, since this is a reflection, it wouldn't have the shadow colors that this would have. This has some shadow colors that are more violet and gray and neutral, but with a tiny amount of the blue. Here, since this part of the vase is a little darker, I have brought in a little bit more color. I don't want to overdo it, but I brought in just a little more color using cobalt blue, which is a little more dark. Using a little cobalt blue near the base to kind of pull the vase down and ground it to the table. And also to connect it to the table, and also to just indicate in the reflection that it's a little darker on this shadow side than it is on the other side. So I'm just doing that with a little bit of cobalt blue. This vase is largely cerulean and manganese blue. And that blue is over the background that was sort of soft yellows and peaches and pinks. So they show through a bit, which is what I wanted. I like the harmony of color, where some of the background can show through, in the same way that we're getting the harmony of color, hopefully, of the tulips down into the background here, and down into the leaves here. So this is, I'd like to just start the leaves. And the leaves are going to be any of my blues. Again, just as I do with my red and violet palette, which I've had for over a decade. And I keep adding, when I run out of color, I just put more color in. And when I get a new color, I just stick a new color in. So here, these are my blues and greens. I like to keep them together so that they don't mix on the palette, and also so that I separately keep my earth colors, yellows and browns. And that is, so when I'm doing a landscape, for example, with a lot of yellow grasses and brown trees, I'm primarily focusing on that palette. Right now we're going to do leaves, so I'm bringing over the palette that I use with all the greens. And I'm just going to go to any green that seems to work for me. I'm going to take a little bit of the olive green, and then the hooker green is a very nice, intense greeny green. So I'm going to mix those two together here. Here's the hooker coming in. And I'm going to take, I think, some of the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to bring that into it's on the same palette. So that's the convenience of having these palettes organized this way, because often these colors do need to be married. I seem to have a little bit of a blue here, so I might as well just, forgetting even which one it is, there are so many blues. So I think I've just put a little bit of that in. A little bit of Cascade green, which is very dark. Yeah, now I'm more or less getting the green that I want. And I'm going, it's very, very dark, which is what I feel I need for this particular composition to, of course, it'll dry lighter. But this composition is has such dark roses that I want to make sure that I balance it out with leaves that are not so light that they seem a distraction in the center of the composition. So, of course, the colors always get lighter as they dry, but I want to put them in some very dark ways. And I'm going to let some of that background show through in this way. So I'll take a little more Cascade green, which is very dark here. And on the underside of the leaves, I'll show more of that. So I'm just kind of defining my leaves. I've already got a little bit of sketch marks below, but I can't see them very well. It doesn't really matter. So here I might see a mark there. And I'll just put in some of this green leaf there. So I'll define some of them. Others, and right now, really what matters not is defining them relative to a pencil mark underneath, which I can't see very well anymore anyway, but defining them relative to where they might fit. And in a few cases I can bring in some lighter color, or by just thinning the color, or bringing in one that's a little more yellowish just to change the hue. And in a couple of places, like right now, I will take some manganese blue and put that right here in this leaf here, and that will carry that color up into it. Put some there too. I'm going to take some manganese blue and just completely define another leaf in a place where I know that I would like to carry that color upward. And now I'll take some of the dark mixture that I made, and some of the Cascade green, which is very, very dark green. And put that in there and let it bleed into that manganese blue. And my hope is that it then harmonizes the color. Let's see where I might have some other. I think I'll put some manganese blue here, right over that tulip shape there. And take some of the Cascade again and carry it out, carry that leaf out a little bit, make it interesting. And this one I am going to square off as if it's bent. It is bent, and make the shape a little more interesting. Same way here, I'll make this one a little more squared off. Not everything rounded, but some things very bold and squared off, just to create shapes that are, and here I'll carry this leaf down and put the vein in, okay. And I'll carry this dark in here, put some dark in here. Right now, there will be more leaves, but I have to be careful not to make a big muddy mess in here. So this is an important time to just let this sit and dry. One of the big tricks about watercolor is knowing when to stop. I'm going to make this a nice little shape cutting across the table here, joining the leaf to the table and otherwise, and balancing out that one here. I'll put another shape here, just again to mirror the other one. With a little bit of lighter color to join it, but not very deliberately, not too structured here. Okay. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and dry. Just bring a little bit down here. That's it. That's all I can do with that. And we'll see you again shortly once it's dry. Okay, we have this pretty dry right now, and the one thing that's needed now is a little bit of violet, very lightly mixed with Payne's Gray shadow here, because we do have a leaf popping down on this side of the vase, and so I just want to show that shadow. I don't think we have too many other shadows that need to creep into the table here. Although I could just indicate the one above very briefly. It's just to make sure that the concept of shadow gives to the viewer. And there's this shadow over here on this side, so I'll just indicate that very lightly in a mixture of violet, any violet, and neutral, which in this case I'm using Payne's Gray, blue hue. Yeah, so leave that. Now, in terms of these other shadows here, and these other colors for the I'm going to go a little bit lighter. I'm going to put some sap green and olive green into my mixture that I had made with the hooker green and cascade and the blue. I'm going to make it a little more yellow, a little more light, and I'm going to put a little more water in it and just put indicate some leaves in the background, but I don't want to have them be too dark and too dominant. So there's one there. I'm using my flat brush. So this is a very inexpensive brush. I bought it in the hardware store. It's called Simply Simmons. It's an angulated flat, and it's got a nice synthetic, and they don't even say what it's made of, but it's got a nice sharp edge. So it's fun to use, it's easy to use. It holds its shape completely, it doesn't change shape. I'm going to just put it around this area here, come up over the red in here. And as I said, there's a fair amount of water in there, so it will dry fairly light. I'm going to put a little bit of the darker side of that mixture in here. I'll put some over here. And since it's more translucent, I'll carry it out a little bit. And it'll be light. Let's see. I might put some here, over here behind the tulips. Put a little bit of this color in here, just to carry it up behind the tulips in some places. And tone down the red a little bit here and there. With the tulips, this isn't necessarily how the leaves go. I might remove that one. I'll just take a paper towel and wipe it away, because what's below it is dry. And I'll take some water, lighten up that corner a little bit anyway. I'm seeing it's just a little too dark. See, it's not that hard to lift the color. If you have the right brush, this brush is stiff enough to lift. So I just blend that color in here. There. Don't want the corner too muddy. Just lift a little color here, lift a little color here. Just wanting to lighten that up there. Just lifting a little color. I'm going to come in, I think, there with a little brighter color, a little bit of orange. Little color here because it's looking a little muddy there, a little brownish and muddy. I don't want that. I'll put a little bit of opera pink in, which is the brightest pink in the palette, and it's almost a fluorescent pink, and it can just brighten up an area like that. It's starting to look a little too brown. Lifting some color in there, and dropping in a tiny bit of opera pink in there. It's very subtle, but suddenly that is not so dull. And let me just repair that leaf, make it a little brighter, not so dark. Okay. I think I'm going to lift also a little color out of this tulip. It's a little too heavy on the top. This brush is soft enough that it won't hurt the paper, but stiff enough that it works very nicely. Very inexpensive, very nice brush for lifting, for having a nice point. And so I'll just carry forward a little more. I'm going to drop a little opera pink in there, which should brighten up that flower there. Oh, wonder what the puppies are barking at. Probably disagreeing over who should have the toy. Okay. And I'm going to drop a little bit of the opera pink in over here. Again, just because it's a slight, it's a very translucent mixture, just a lot of water and opera pink. But it should brighten up that corner a little bit. I'll put a little orange in there too. The orange is more opaque, but it'll blend with the mixture of the opera pink and should brighten up that corner a little bit. It's looking a little muddy. Okay. This shadow here is a little too neutral for me, so I'm going to take some Quintandone magenta and add some water. Yeah. Okay. I had put some green there. It was just a little too dull. I'll do the same thing, just a little bit of the Quintandone magenta, which is a nice bright reddish violet. If you don't have that, you can try to create it by adding just your typical imperial violet with alizarin crimson or red till you get the mixture that you want. But if you're buying colors, that quinacridone, it's called quinacridone, I don't know why I say quinacridone. Quinacridone magenta is one of my favorite colors that I don't try to mix it. I like the quinacridone magenta, and also to brighten things up, and also the opera pink are wonderful bright colors, so I don't try to mix those. Just like in the blues, you know, I buy the manganese blue and the cerulean blue, they're quite different. I don't try to make my own mixture of those. It would be, from my point of view, too difficult. So there are times when just using primary colors to mix colors is not going to work very well. And frankly, having a lot of colors, if you can manage to get them, in some countries it's hard to get these colors. I worked in a number of countries where they really aren't available locally in the art stores. and shipping them to there is very difficult. I've painted and bought paints and worked with art shops, sometimes teaching, sometimes showing work in Abu Dhabi and of the Emirates, and Lusaka in Zambia, and Thailand. And so these colors that we have so readily available to us in the United States are not always available in other countries. That's why you will see very different palettes from some of our master painters that work from other countries. Getting this wide range of colors is not always easy for them. But they do incredible work anyway, you know, like the work of N.B. Gorung in Nepal is amazing. This palette is fairly limited, but his work is unrivaled in being really extraordinary. So I'm just throwing in little bits of this, in this case right now, some little bits of dark to re-emphasize my stems where I had removed them. And what I'm doing with the stems is just making some line, but leaving the center just the color of the background, whatever the background is. So in some cases the background has some green, in some cases it has some red, in some cases some of the peach from the original background. But I'm just indicating the stem, the stems. Because the stems are actually, the stems on the tulip are almost white and very translucent. They have a little bit of pink up near the flower. They have a little bit of green in some places. But they're very, very translucent, so you can safely use a number of. Okay, I think that's a good stopping point for now, to let this really fully dry to see if I need to lift some more. And I'll see if I need to put in a little more red in some of these leaves. I think not. I may need to tone down some of this area here and some of that area there. And I think I probably do need to put in a few white highlights here and there with a dry brush. So that will be the next and probably the last stage of this painting. I hope you're enjoying the process. Okay, I have done some splatter on the background with orange and pink to just soften and diffuse some of the pattern in the background and also make it a little warmer. I've put some Hansa yellow over here also for the same reason. And now I've got some titanium white directly from the tube. It's a very bright white. It's a little, I mean, there are three whites: titanium, zinc, and Chinese white. I think probably the titanium white is the brightest. And I'm going to first of all, put a little more here, a little more bright white in the vase, and a little more in the reflection. And I'm just using this flat brush And on the side, as I'm going around this, the tulips, where I want to have them, some white in the tulips, but I do want to have some, there'll be a little on tips, and a little bit of reflection here and there. Not put a tiny bit in the leaves. And if I want to later, I can always glaze over the white with a little bit of pink to soften the white. But for right now, I'm just going to try this out and see how it looks. Stand back and look at it. I don't want to overdo it. Put a little up here. I won't do those two. I'll just put a little where the tulip is facing the light. I'm softening some of these edges and making sure that it's where the tulip is facing the light. Just slight touch here and there. I don't think I'll touch that one. I don't think I'll do anything with that. No, I won't do that. And maybe on this leaf a little bit, on that leaf a little bit. I better check that out, just in case. I've got a fire going in the wood stove. Just a second. Hi. Oh, that was nothing. I mean, they have different barks, the dogs, my puppies, but that was more like an alarm bark, so I listened to what kind of bark it is, and they were upset. They were seeing that the fire was very strong. I had just put an extra log in it. So, but it was fine. So I put a little on the rim. I think I'm going to take a little bit of orange and mix it here with this white in one section here. And I think for this one here, I may want to put in a soft orangey bit and blend it in. Not blending very well. Yeah, that's better. Clean my brush. Just diffuse that color in. Lighten that flower a little bit with the sort of lightened opaque orange. I think I'm going to put a little more orange in, and a little more orange and a little bit of scarlet. It's not bright enough. It's too pale. Let's try over here. Yeah, a little more of a pink. A little more of a brighter. Okay. And I'm going to take a little bit of that and put that in, let's see, I want to have a lighter flower here somewhere. Maybe here, a little bit lighter. It makes the flower opaque because, of course, the white is actually semi-transparent. It's not totally opaque like some of the cadmium colors, which I tend not to use, but it's semi-opaque, so it mixes nicely with the color to lighten it, and that's what I'm going to do there. I think that was better than the white. I'm going to take this and go over the white that is there, blend it in, lighten that flower a little bit. It's just a little bit too much darkness. Okay, back again. Yeah, I think I'm going to go over some of this white. I mentioned before that I might do that. It's just a little too bright and it looks funny, but I'll leave little bits of it. And I'm going over it with that red and orange that is mixed with the white. Just lightening this color so in a few places. And blending the white in other places. So there's still some white showing, but it's in the context of lighter color around it. Same up here. Slightly lightening this flower here. Not a lot, just a tiny bit. I put more red into that red and white mixture. So it's just, so I'm just defining some of the details in here. At the same time, I'm taking a little bit of that Payne's Gray and putting it down here. Because I don't want all the darks sitting together up there by themselves. So I'm bringing some down here and balancing that out a little bit. I don't want to take those darks away, but I also don't want them only up there for some reason. It would be a bit odd. So I'm taking this Payne's Gray blue hue. Which could be made probably by just taking an ivory black and adding a cobalt blue to it. I think that's a little more balanced. I'll carry some of it in under this leaf here for the leaf behind. And in this little crevice here, a little bit. Tiny bit there, and a tiny bit here. Just a thin line, I'll carry it out to the tip. Okay. And a very small amount over here at the base of the flower. Okay. I know that is a lot of dark in a painting. I don't normally do that much dark, but I felt like at this time. In fact, what I also am going to do is add some splatter. I'm going to take my rigger, just this long brush here. The reason I'm going to use the rigger for that is that I think I'll just do a test. But in the past I've gotten a very nice kind of splatter using the rigger. It's kind of a floppy brush. It's a long liner brush. So let me just test that here on the back of this sheet. Yeah, you see? That's good. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to take that rigger and I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray and my black. The two big piles are next to each other. Mix them. Because I want to just have some black dark splatter now in there. Okay, and then I'm going to take that same rigger, go into that mixture. I think you can see I've got a black pile and a Payne's Gray, and I'm mixing the two, and I'm just putting plenty of color in between the two of them, letting them mix. Because the other thing I want to do is have some calligraphic lines. So I'm going to I had this one. So the idea is of some small twigs put in the I'm not doing this for any other reason other than creating some contrast and diversity in this. One could say it's not needed, and that maybe could be seen as a distraction, but you know, you just have to do with what you feel like doing. And from the beginning, I always thought that I would do this as my last step. And I kind of like the musicality of it. I feel like it has some nice, as long as it dries dark enough, which I hope it does. Yeah. I'll just take this one here and bring it over. I'm putting my rigger in the, I've got a black splatter down here that I don't want, so I'm putting my rigger there and having some pink. I'll put some water and then just put some of that pink in there and let it diffuse. Spray a little. And then just plain water. Spray a little. Get a little soft pattern down here, so it's a little more textured. This is the same mixture that I was using to lighten the tulips. So I put some water, blend some of it. Yeah, I think that'll be all right. It just creates a little more diversity in texture. I think I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take some more of the titanium white, add a little bit of water, not too much, just enough so that it's able to be. Now here's where I can really ruin things, but what the hell, you know, gotta be relaxed about these things. Because the other thing I was hoping to do was a little bit of white splatter. Yes, tiny bit. Thank you, rigger. The rigger's good for that. Okay, that is more than enough sparkle. So that was just a little bit of of that titanium white mixed with water. And splattered in. I don't think I want to do any more than that. Okay, this painting is finished. And I hope you enjoyed the process. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate sharing and the benefit of the internet to be able to do something like this. Bless you today. Okay, bye-bye.